We do transportation, energy, gender and racial equality, natural wildlife, climate, sort of politics, education, better jobs and wages all have in common. These are all social issues that affect not only Americans here at home, but other citizens in other countries. Some of them are more critical depending on which part of the world. But the one I would like to focus on is more of a global impact. To some, it could be a small aspect with great benefits, but if used incorrectly or in the wrong hands, could be very deadly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking of nuclear power. Now, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear those words? Is it uranium, radioactive waste, terrorists, mutated animals from spills, or perhaps bombing such as Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Maybe even unintentional events such as the disaster in Chernobyl in the Ukraine, or maybe the Fukushima shutdown in Japan. All these are correct, but there's so much more than that. Imagining powering your house with electricity in a way that is less expensive, produce a whole lot more energy, less pollution, and less burning of fossil fuels. I'm pretty sure the majority of you have heard some talk about this. The list doesn't stop here though. Like, everyone loves food, right? So whether it be sweets and salts or freshly picked out of the ground, as I mentioned earlier, the process is less expensive. And I know you've seen how the grow on organic foods has been, and I'm pretty sure if you've seen that, then you've seen the price on this. But with the innovations of that come from nuclear energy, preservations in food and fertilizers can be made to last longer, more efficient from radiation. While on the topic of radiation, how are CAT scans, MRIs, and X-rays performed? The radiation, of course. While the many uses of nuclear energy sound impressive, there are also many challenges. When broken down, it's a very simple process to understand, but it's also an extreme tool to use. How nuclear power is produced is very carefully supervised. Although mistakes happen, most of it can be contained safely. Now, the way nuclear energy sounds is very basic. It's basically the separation of atoms into two, which loses mass and in turn produces energy. It's probably the simplest way to put it, but when we're talking about nuclear fission, the atoms that are used are uranium because they contain high amounts of protons, 92 to be exact. And when they're split by neutrons, they collide with other atoms, causing different reactions. This splitting releases heat and gamma rays. Now, of course, this is done in a safe and controlled environment. So they are submerged into water, which allows the heat to turn the water into steam, and this steam drives a turbine which spins a generator to produce power. This is how steam power is used. They also use fossil fuels and coal burning. But the uranium itself isn't submerged into the water. It is formed into pellets that are arranged into rods that are collected into bundles. And these bundles are the ones that are submerged into the water. This is a part of the process fundamentals used in nuclear energy. Pretty sure you've heard of this process in some source, especially the words radioactive and uranium. Now that we have a basic understanding of how nuclear power is formed exactly, we can move on to see what other uses it has other than producing high amounts of electricity. As mentioned earlier, the list of functions is very long, but let's focus on just a few that are really important. One of the most heard of would be in medicine. The machines that are used in doctors' offices emit forms of radiation. Just as you've heard in the commercials ads on the radio with a parent speaking about sending her kids to chemotherapy, to certain practices because they use lower amounts of radiation. So diagnoses and therapies are given with isotopes. Radioisotopes are isotopes that are unstable, causing them to be radioactive. How this works is the patient is given a small radioactive dose which emits gamma rays from within. And from here it's easier to indicate tumors, study the heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, blood circulation volume, and the bone structure. These gamma rays can also be used for sterilization in certain kinds of doses for cancer cells, thyroid disorders, implants, and many more. Another main use of this nuclear technology would be in the food industry, as I mentioned earlier. It is used in the preservation of food and in the use of fertilizers. It is less expensive, allows more isotopes, which boosts the production of food with minimal loss to the environment. Another great example would be in pesticides. Now, this one just sounds way more easier and simpler than others mentioned. Basically, they use a technique where they have eggs which are sterilized with gamma rays. Once they hatch, the males are sent to infested areas, and here they're able to mate with no offspring being produced. So, with all these great aspects of nuclear power, Why isn't the whole world jumping in on this nuclear powered technology? Well, probably for the biggest known reason, fear. Fear of what exactly? As I stated earlier, the process is carefully contained, but sometimes accidents happen. Sometimes they're not accidents. These acts of violence are what most of us would define as acts of terrorism. One of the other uses of this kind of technology would be used in the military. When used for the wrong purposes or gone in the wrong hands, nuclear weapons such as atomic bombs can be used to send a whole nation into fear. They can be, for some, it's merely a warning for an opposing country, but for the citizens affected in the site, it is far from a warning. Whether it's a victim from an attack or an accident, there are certain symptoms from radiation, like the loss of hair, bleeding sores, asthma, and many more. The next reason could actually fall underneath all these categories from the military, from the preservation, from the food, from electricity, and that's of pollution. Although uranium does decay and lose its radioactivity, it's a very long process and it's very time consuming, which takes hundreds of thousands of years. The bad part about it is that it's not easily recycled. What factories can do is one of two things. They can either bury the radioactive waste, which basically when it's buried is still emitting form into the atmosphere through the soil. The other option is basically by separating atoms. When they separate them, they create more radioactive atoms, causing more environmental hazard. We have seen why the use of nuclear energy is so highly applauded, and why it isn't the main source of energy today. As we can see, it's very productive, benefactor to our lives. It does have its drawbacks, just like everything else, but then again, nothing is perfect. Other sources have their own little problems as well, such as burning of fossil fuels and coal for energy. They have more of an impact on the environment, but they're not as dangerous to one individually. As we learned from the past, we can only go up from here, and hopefully we will. We conclude that this process sounds simple, but yet complicated at the same time, so this is obviously no Dexter's Lab game.